this is in particular to the passing of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Let's speak to the individual that represents his foundation, that is the Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation, Reverend Musa Zondi. Reverend Zondi, good evening to you. Thank you for your time tonight. How would you describe the last 24 hours?
It has been traumatic and tumultuous, to say the least, because from the early hours of this morning, since Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi passed on, it changed the whole landscape of the length and breadth of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, and the country as a whole.
He had been unwell for some time, in fact also spending his birthday hospitalized. What were you hoping for under the current circumstances? Was there any point, at least from a foundation point of view, that you had prepared for the worst?
Well, you know, the human trait is to hope for the best, but on the other hand, we have to be pragmatic and expect any eventuality. It was, in a way, his illness, which didn't just start with his recent hospitalization, there have been several before, was a premonition to us, to tell us that it could happen any time now, also taking his age into consideration. You know, his peers, the people of his own age, have passed on. So he was the last remaining of that generation of leaders. And therefore, we knew that the next thing that would come, unpalatable as it may be, it would be the day that has come today.
What would you say that you, as the foundation, are currently seized with, Reverend Zondi?
At the moment, we are all seized with the preparations for his grand send-off, befitting of the stature of the person that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was. But as the foundation, our concern is that he didn't just represent the political side of life. He is a multifaceted personality, a political leader, of course, yes, but a traditional leader as well, a churchman as well, and a man of the people, and a person who is involved in many causes of development, human causes, for the upliftment of the people of the country. And he was, of course, also concerned with issues of nature conservation, and he was the embodiment of the history, if I may say, of the Zulu people themselves and the people of the region of KwaZulu-Natal. And in a very unlikely sense for other people, he also was a walking library for not only for the party that he led for many years, the IFP, but also, in a way, a walking library even for the party that he originally belonged to, the ANC, where he cut his political teeth in the late 40s.
You would have heard by now, at least throughout the day, some of the reflections that people have been making about the life and times of Prince Buthelezi. And there really is no simple way of looking at his life, quite contradictory depending on which moments in history one focuses on. But certainly one does get the impression that in the later part of his life, he very much wanted to ensure that how history remembers him is favorably.
Well, no person is an angel. I mean, he himself oftentimes reminded us that he was no saint and that he responded to different situations. He was a man of the moment. So he knew that he responded at the best possible way that he could. In the course of doing that, some people got offended, some people praised him, and but he was man enough to say to those that I offended, to those on whose toes I stepped on, I apologize. I did not intend it. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. But at the same time, he was resolved that history had catapulted him in a position where he had to be. I remember in one of his interviews when they asked him if history would afford you a second chance, what would you do differently? He said, I would do exactly as I've done right through the ages.
Of course, you know, there are those who say that you can't argue for a better past. And when one looks at what he had to say, in particular, when we reflect on that democratic moment, and Khuleko Hleng was speaking on it now, and that has really come to frame the lens through which many also dive in and reflect and understand his legacy, that this country was brought to the brink of a civil war, and he is seen to be an individual that was central to that.
Well, of course, I think, history had ordained that he had to be at the center of a tumultuous event. That was not, in our view, in our humble view, of his own making. And whether people will agree with that or not, well, we leave that to history. But at the same time, we just want to say that I myself, when I listen to analysts and some people who have impressions of what was happening at that time, I was involved through thick and thin. I sometimes feel that they are talking about a different country that I didn't live in because I saw things differently, I experienced things differently. I have the fortune, for example, to have been exposed from the 70s to the leadership of the ANC, which was still then in exile. That are just legendary figures to most of the people, even the current leaders of the ANC, the younger leaders of the ANC. I knew how they felt, I knew how they thought. We drank tea with them, we took risks, we did all these things, all for the liberation of this country at the behest of Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And in fact, not only the leadership in the ANC, which was then in exile, but the PAC as well, because the PAC and the ANC were both equally recognized by the Organization of African Unity as premier liberation movements for representing Black South Africans, the oppressed in this country, as well as the United Nations. So I had been in meetings with heads of state accompanying him in Africa at the height of apartheid, whether it was in Lesotho, whether it was the leaders of this country in West Africa, in East Africa, in the SADC region, which we now call it SADC region. So I've listened to those discussions. I know the kind of conversations in hushed tones, the kind of assignments that he was given, and people do not know a lot of the complexity of the man and the assignment that he carried. It was for that reason that at one time, during the days when the Black Consciousness movement, at the time of Steve Biko, wanted actually to throttle him, Oliver Tambo at one time said in New York, when in the presence of Johnny McCarthy, he said, Abazi, they don't know that we catapulted this man in the belly of the beast himself, and we said to him, he must learn to swim and survive. And two things that must not happen to him: one, you must not die; two, you must not end up in Robben Island. So don't, but oppose the obnoxious system of apartheid, but we don't need another Nelson Mandela out of you. do something that needed to be done within the country that was uniquely there, that uniquely a person of his stature had to do.
Reverend Zondi, of course what you're saying, echoes comments that he made while he was still alive, much of it again in defense of his legacy and really wanting to restore aspects of his name that he felt were being dragged through the mud or that were in tatters. Do you find that you, as a foundation, you have to spend a lot of time defending his life, defending his legacy?
Well, not really. I don't think that our job is to preserve his legacy in the best possible way that we can. And it's a matter of it's a matter of history for people to judge for themselves, to be exposed to the correct information, that over time, when all the heat and the negativity has passed on, people will actually look at him differently. Actually, I don't think that our main concern at this point in time is to present Mangosuthu Buthelezi as some kind of an angel, really. No. I mean, if you were in a burning house, you don't worry about whether you look nice on TV or whatever, but you do what you have to do at the spur of the moment in order to survive and not be burnt with the house and retrieve whatever you've got to retrieve out of a burning house and burning building. But in the course of doing that, of course, a lot of things sometimes go overly wrong, but I'm not an apologist for him. But I'm trying to say we in the foundation are merely concerned about telling the story of the man, of his positive contribution, without in any within stretch of imagination denying the other things that other people might have felt otherwise, other than how those of us who were working with him saw him in a particular light.
Reverend Zondi, over the next couple of days, you, of course, are going to have to get to grips with the fact that he's no longer here. There's no question, regardless of whether good or bad, this is in terms of the impact politically that he's had on this country. What has this country lost as a result of that?
Yes, I think this country has lost, as I said earlier on, a walking dictionary of the history of this country, a particular history of this country, particularly the history of the struggle for liberation. But I think he departed this world with a spear in his heart. He was bleeding in his heart quietly, that of course there was no true reconciliation that he hoped for and he longed for between his old movement and the African National Congress and the IFP and himself as an individual. Because he did these things not on his own accord, because he was asked to have prevailed upon to do these things at a particular moment in history, so that even the leaders, some of the few leaders, older leaders of the ANC, who are still alive, maybe they will be bolder now, we don't know, and tell the story as it is. Whether they do that or they do not do that, but those of us who know the truth, our job in the foundation is to tell the correct story. And our job at this point in time, right now, is to handle the situation in the best possible manner we can in order to give him the best send-off that he deserves.
Reverend Musa Zondi is the spokesperson for the Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation.